You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagberdian and Paul Garrison. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Andre Hagberdian, and joined, as always, by Paul Garrison. What's going on, Paul?
What's going on, Andre? Big news, man. Big news. Is this 72 or is this one?
Yeah, so this is episode 72 of the podcast, but it's really, if our listeners paid attention to the theme intro, it's no longer the SDSU football podcast. It's now the SDSU podcast.
Branching out.
Something we've been, looking to do and thinking about over the last several months. Obviously we put together a lot of episodes football related, and I think that'll continue. But, with so much going on in the world of San Diego State athletics, basketball Final Four, softball super regionals, Pac-12, Big 12, Power 5, Power 6 move coming hopefully soon. There's just a lot of other stories that we can help tell, a lot of coaches and players that we'd love to talk about, and I think listeners would want to listen to. We've made this rebrand to go, SDSU podcast, so we can branch out and help tell those stories.
You said it perfectly. The one that we have today actually goes out to the broader San Diego sports community because it centers on MLS and what that means for San Diego State. But there were so many details, I think, about MLS, Right to Dream, that Coach Hopkins was able to put in for us.
Yeah, funny enough, I think my final push and your acceptance on this rebranding was over beers at OG's before a San Diego Wave soccer match. And the conversation at OG's was built around MLS, soccer, impacts. And, we talked about, hey, Coach Hopkins would be a perfect person to be, one of the first, if not the first person. I think it was the next day or the day after that we reached out to San Diego State and were able to get Coach Hopkins on the podcast fairly soon after that. So it clicked. You're right. This is a broader San Diego sports theme. And I think we'll touch a lot about that moving forward. I know San Diego State, obviously, Coach Hopkins coaches men's soccer. They play in the Pac-12 as an affiliate, so it's strange. And we talked to him a little bit about that, and we'll get into that later. But I think it was a really good interview to start off this journey that we're taking.
Yeah, no question. And to your point, I thought it was a really good conversation that put a lot of the pieces together for me about what the MLS is trying to do. Snapdragon Stadium. There's a lot. So I think the interview's going to be very enjoyable.
Yep. Let's get right to the interview. And then Paul and I will be back to give our takeaways. We want to welcome Coach Ryan Hopkins, SDSU men's soccer coach, to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, and looking forward to chatting with you guys.
Absolutely.
We appreciate you taking the time. You've been the coach of SDSU soccer for the past 3 years, starting in 2020. The big talk around San Diego State athletics is obviously conference realignment, moving to a Power 5. But soccer already plays in the Pac-12. Can you describe what that process is like to play in the Pac-12 when the other sports aren't in the Power 5?
Yeah, I think it's a really unique situation for us. It obviously helps, I think, elevate our program in the recruiting world and the access to a certain level of players, that we can get. We've been able to give a unique perspective, as we talk about conference realignment and, into a Power 5 conference, from the whole department. So I think it's been, really, really good on that side of it. And then I think even on top of that, not only being in the Pac-12, but, the Pac-12 is arguably the top conference in college soccer too. You really have the ACC, in my opinion, and the Pac-12. So I think Ben was telling me our SID. I've played of my games coached here in 3 years, like 65% have been played against top 5 teams in the country, which has been, a unique challenge too, because we only have, 5 other Pac-12 teams. So you're playing double round robin against everybody. And we've ran into an interesting cycle where Oregon State, Washington, Stanford have been, pretty dominant, pretty much ranked in the top 5 all 3 of my years here. So it's been it's been a unique challenge, especially for a first job. But yeah, I've really enjoyed building the program. Really enjoy where we're headed, and really enjoyed the support that we receive from the department across the board.
Looking back just this past season, the overall record was 5-9-4. How do you reflect back on the 2022 season?
Yeah, it was such a really unique season. We brought in 15 players. It was kind of my first real class. After COVID, obviously I was hired, and then COVID hit 2 weeks later. So it's been a really unique process. I think for me over the last couple of years of, managing the roster and building a culture, which I think is, the most important part of what I want to do here in developing this program. So, and that was really hard when you couldn't even meet with anybody and you couldn't have activities where you could grow the team together. So, I think that was hard because the team was really split, kind of younger and older guys, just the nature of what it was. And our sport's hard. We have 2 weeks to prepare before our first game. And then it's just, you're playing a game every 3.3 days for 3 months straight. So it's really hard to kind of build that. So I think honestly, you look at that record and, obviously it's not ideal, but I think within that record too, it's like you look at, 2 of those losses, you're playing the number 1 team in the country. You have Stanford, who was number 5 in the country. You're up 2-1 with 5 minutes left, and you manage to lose that game 3-2. On the other side of it, you beat Denver, who's number 6 in the country. You go to Creighton on the road, who ends up being in the Final Four, and you tie them on the road. You tie Stanford on the road. So, yeah, I think it was just I think the season was really that of like players that didn't really know each other that well. We were trying to figure them out as coaches, and I think they didn't have those tight bonds. I think when games got really tight and got really, really tough, that to give us that little bit of an extra edge to get over the top. So, yeah, I think that was really it. I think even within all of that, I think there's been a clear development in the program of not just hanging on against those top teams. I think now we're like really able to play with those teams, and it's really an even game in our sport. It's a handful of plays every game that make the difference, and we just didn't quite honestly make enough of those plays last year.
So you mentioned that schedule that you played, and you did have a lot of positive results. Got points out of playing against some of the top teams. I mean, is there any element like seeing that you could play so well, but then maybe not having always that consistency? Did that make it even like a little bit more frustrating?
Yeah, I mean, I think us as coaches, we, are gluttons for torturing ourselves. So I think that was even more probably torturing. I probably got the least amount of sleep I've ever gotten in any season that I've ever coached last fall. And because it's like, yeah, you're so close, and then you could have a great result, and then you're like 3 days later, it's like, who is this team? Who are you guys? Like, I don't recognize any of you with how you just played in that game. So, yeah, I think that was probably the hardest part of like just trying to put our finger on it. And I think, yeah, we just after the season, we really sat down with every player and kind of our team leaders, and I think this spring has been amazing because it was really my first spring too, where we had, I think, a core of a team being carried over to the next fall. So, we had, we'll have 19 returners, from last year's team, and all of those guys were obviously with us in the spring. So I think it was really exciting part of growing that culture, of growing, the things that go into that to really get us over the top in those, in those tight games.
Earlier, you mentioned that being in the best conference in America gets you access to athletes that other schools would dream of being able to get onto the campus. But one of those athletes, CJ Fadre, he was the top drawer, National Freshman of the Year, and also the 13th overall pick in the MLS draft. When other soccer players see somebody come in and have that level of success, how does that help in recruiting and being able to sell the message that you're trying to, give to recruits across the country?
Yeah, it's massive. And I think even more massive of like, I mean, it was a kid, he lives in Coronado, went to Coronado High School, was playing high school soccer, this time a year ago. It just actually crazy to think about, which is crazy when you actually think about it that way. So I think, from a San Diego community, and I know we'll probably touch upon this later, but just I think that soccer culture that we have, here in San Diego, that is quite strong. Obviously he was, kind of born from that. But yeah, I think it does show that you can come here. And what we say all the time is, obviously we have a lot of guys that want to be professionals. I think when you get to this, type of level, in the places that we're recruiting from, MLS academies, et cetera, everybody wants to be a pro, and there's a lot of access to be a professional. So, we really say is like, this is just a different pathway. You have to have a general desire to obtain an education and hopefully stay here to get a degree. Obviously, that is our number one goal. But there are, different avenues if you've shown that you can perform at a high enough level, like CJ has, that there's going to be special opportunities to do those, and we can stoke those fires, and we have those relationships with, professional clubs to funnel you into those situations too. So I think it adds another element to our recruiting. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, our mission is to prepare them for life after college. And, hopefully that's professional soccer. I think we've shown that we can develop that, but ultimately I want them to be good husbands. I want them to be good fathers, good members of their community, and have a great degree from a, world-class university.
You mentioned you have 19 returning players. Obviously, with that comes higher expectations. So how do your staff and the players kind of look forward to what they expect in 2023?
Yeah, I really believe it's a privilege to have expectations, and you want to have that pressure. That's the kind of pressure I wanted. I remember in my interview, when JD and I were out to lunch, he literally asked me, he's like, what are your thoughts on, being in the Pac-12 and being an affiliate? Is that something you would want to continue? And I told him, I said, listen, I don't know that I would be that interested in this job, if we weren't in the Pac-12. Like, that's the pressure I thrive on. That's the pressure I want. That's a major reason, that I came here. So I think for us to reach our ultimate goals, our goals are to be in Final Fours. And I made no secret about that. It's a lot of hard work. It's, a long pathway to get there. But, I've also been fortunate enough to coach in 3 of them. So, I understand the pathway that gets there. I understand the pressure and, the everyday dedication and accountability it takes to get there. So, I think for me, it's, just not trying to worry so much about every single result, and that's for me and the group, of just like, hey, we're going to take it one day at a time. We're going to just continue to try and get better every single day, and then largely results will, take care of themselves.
Well, the basketball team made their first Final Four, so there you go. No pressure.
And I mean, and it's, I think those are the things that are exciting too, when you see, and our athletic department is pretty unique, when you look at, those kind of top tier, top echelon athletic departments, in the sense of like, we're all in the same building. There isn't like football in some like mega building across campus, basketball's in their own world. Like, we're all together. All the coaches get along really, really well. We all bounce ideas off of each other. I'm right next door to Stacy, so I got to talk to her today about, their run and everything that they were able to accomplish and get, basically a game away from being in their version of the Final Four. So I think it's exciting when you see those things, and you see all the student athletes, and all the student athletes go to each other's games. There's just a different bond here. And it's, it makes it exciting that, it can be done here. And men's soccer has done it. I mean, 1987, men's soccer was in the NCAA final. So it's not an inconceivable dream. That's for sure.
The big news in San Diego, at least big soccer news, was MLS is coming in 2025. What are your thoughts on that development?
I couldn't be more excited for that. I think it's an unbelievable soccer culture. I think from, even the other levels of soccer with obviously San Diego Loyal, even Albion, in the NISA, San Diego Wave is doing an NWSL is incredible. So I just think there's such a soccer excitement and fever here that, and then now to get to the highest level of, what we have in men's professional soccer in our country, to have it here in such a perfect stadium for soccer, is I can't wait to get out there and, watch the team perform and just enjoy it as a fan. That's for sure.
The big thing that came with that announcement was the Right to Dream academies, part of it with Tom Vernon. They're in Ghana, Denmark, Egypt, coming soon to San Diego. Could you describe or what your thoughts are on how San Diego FC or FC San Diego, whichever they go with, their approach to filling their roster?
Yeah. So funny enough, I actually just got back from Ghana.
Oh, wow.
So I was at Right to Dream as well. So, I think there's going to be some exciting, things with that. They've done a unbelievable job as an academy of producing talent, not only for the professional game, but obviously for the college game. Some of the top, college guys, I think, they had Shaq Muhammad, who's number 2 overall pick in this draft. Yeah, they've been able to produce quite a few players, for college soccer too. So I think there's an exciting, potential there. And that was a really exciting trip to see how they have the academy set up there and, the different things that they have, going on. And I think you're going to see, and I think Tom touched upon it in his introductory press conference. I think you're going to see a young, exciting, group of players that they're going to be able to build, and bring here to San Diego. They have, Ghana as a country, even outside of the Right to Dream Academy. I mean, the talent level is incredible. I think they're going to be on the forefront of that. I think once they get the US, base academy going as well, not only for San Diego kids, but, greater Southern California. And then like they talked about being able to dip across the, across the border too is, I think it's going to be a really exciting, young, fast team. That'll be really, really fun to watch.
So, I mean, what was the genesis of that trip to Ghana? I mean, where did that come from? I mean, how do you tell us more details about that?
Yeah, I mean, there is quite a few college soccer players, and not just from Right to Dream, but just in general in college soccer. It's good because English is their primary language, so that helps with some transitions to coming over, and it's just a very talent rich country. So yeah, there's quite a few other organizations that are operating in that country too, that are helping bring US players over. So obviously it was a combination of that. And then, being able to get to Right to Dream where, Right to Dream also has a couple boys here that are in prep schools on the East Coast that we've been in contact with. It was just kind of a combination of, all those different things that came together quite well for the trip.
Yeah. I mean, so was this something that had been planned for a long time? Was it in connection with the MLS's decision? I mean, it's a pretty quick turnaround to be able to go to Ghana since the announcement.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, it just oddly enough worked out with that timing of the actual announcement. But yeah, I had had the trip planned maybe from about March, kind of March on, with some of the different showcases that were going on, and then it just ended up working out with being able to get to Right to Dream and see everything there. And it was funny enough. I met Tom. Tom's kid is actually in the academy. He's got 2 boys. One's in the academy, one's not. They were both there at the time. So it was pretty fun to see the whole operation that they have going on there. It's pretty special. You have to take a boat across a river to get there. And so you're in kind of like this safari type of a deal. And then you get there and you have the school, and then you actually walk through the village to get to the field. So you're kind of like transported into like 2 different worlds. So it's a pretty unique, special experience for sure.
It's incredible. And I mean, just with that approach, I don't know if you've even had conversations about it with Tom, but I mean, where does San Diego State maybe fit into like the vision that they have
Yeah.
and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think they're very unique in terms of world football development. Some countries you drop out of school at 12, 13, 14, and you're trying to make it as a professional footballer. And, obviously there's a lot of pitfalls to that, because even at those levels, maybe 10% are making it. And that's probably a pretty high estimate, So
Right.
What are the other 90, 95% that don't make it doing when that is the primary mode of or goal of your academy? And when we met with some of the administrative side of Right to Dream, I think that's why we align so well, because I think when you look at developing footballers, the vision of Right to Dream is develop them holistically, develop them as people first, develop them educationally, and then obviously, if they have the ability to get to a professional level, they can go there. And if that doesn't work out, how can we help them be prepared for life? And I think education is the key, to that. So I think they have a great mission to, help place them in, whether it's prep schools here or place them in college. So I think we just had a lot of alignment in terms of how we view that, and that's a big part of our culture here is developing them as people, developing their, the core values that we have here, and then preparing them for the real world. And still could be professional soccer. Obviously, we've shown that we can do that as
Right.
well, but it might be professional in something else with, like we said, a world-class degree from an amazing university. So I think there's just a lot of alignment between how we view the vehicles of using professional soccer, how we use the vehicle of our sport to better yourself, at the end of the day. So having that as our guiding principles, I think there's going to be a lot of alignment just because of that.
Are there other models like this where the MSL works closely with an academy to develop players?
Not, I would say most MLS, just have their own, kind of their own academy. That's kind of been, I would say with a lot of teams coming in to the league now, that's been a part of the criteria to get a team, is that, you would have an academy within a certain number of years. And now those academies are down to, I think, under 12s, I would say, and now you even have the MLS Next Pro, which is kind of taken away. Most MLS academies don't have U19s anymore. They go U17s and then MLS Next Pro, basically. So I would say no one is really doing it, kind of the way that, Right to Dream and the Monsoor Group, is going to be doing it with, San Diego FC or FC San Diego, whatever they decide to be called.
Right.
I think it's going to be it's a really unique, way that they're doing it. And I think it's going to be really going to help set them apart for sure.
Yeah, San Diego FC isn't not the only group you found success working with. CJ Fodry came from the Loyal.
Yep.
Could you just talk about the state of soccer overall in San Diego and how that's helped?
It's amazing. Like, as just a fan of soccer, I don't, there's probably not too many cities like San Diego. We only have the Padres, right, as a professional, major professional sport here in a massive population of people. So I think it's such a amazing opportunity to have. And I know there's been, some arguments about, should it have been Loyal, whatever. I don't get myself involved in that, because I generally enjoy just watching it. We have alums on the Loyal. I have friends on the Loyal. I love going to those games. I think they have a very cool atmosphere at Torero, and they play a really amazing brand. I think Nate has done an unbelievable job. Obviously, Landon and Nate done an unbelievable job constructing that roster, constructing a game model and principles of play that are clear and like fun to watch. And we've been fortunate, like you said, the relationships, we've played them 2 years in a row in the spring, as well. The relationships we have with, having CJ, and we had another kid out of their academy. Yeah, for me, it's another, with San Diego FC, it's another opportunity for, those type of relationships to grow. But yeah, I've been so impressed with San Diego Loyal, what they've been able to and capture that, I think, excitement of soccer culture here, in San Diego.
It seems like just like you just mentioned that the entire world is starting to recognize San Diego as just this fever, that soccer fever you just described. But you
Yeah.
obviously were an assistant, and you coached in Final Fours, top play, around the country 3 years ago. I mean, did you see this? And is this the reason why you chose San Diego? Because I mean, it's amazing. It seems like you saw before anyone else did, the potential of what the city could be. And then did that draw you to leading the Aztecs?
Yeah, I'll be honest. Like, I give a lot of credit to JD, his vision, and the other stakeholders, obviously President De La Torre as well. I think both their visions of how they constructed the stadium, what they promised with that. They promised that when they went to build the stadium, that was a real possibility that an MLS team, would be here, and here it is. So I think they have to get a lot of credit for, laying out that vision and quite honestly executing it on time, on budget, to be able to get that in, get an NWSL team, the San Diego Wave. I mean, what a unbelievable atmosphere they have. I love going to their games. I've been to 3 or 4 of their games, and they have world class players obviously playing for them, and world class support, too. So yeah, I give a lot of credit, to the leadership within our department, the leadership that went into, constructing and acquiring the stadium and building the stadium, to have those visions. And I think when you have people like that at the top, it makes following it and makes it a lot easier for sure.
Andre just took me to my first Wave game last week.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just unbelievable. I mean, it is like
It's
I
amazing.
couldn't, it
Yeah.
really is. And
Yeah.
I mean, just everything that people had been saying about what that venue can be for soccer.
Yeah.
But I mean, MLS, they were just calling it one of the top stadiums like in North America. I mean, it's just something else. I mean, from your expert perspective, right? Me looking at it, I might not pick up everything about it, but what is it that JD Wicker and his team got right about the venue from a soccer perspective?
There's not a bad seat in the house. Like, you could
Right.
go all the way at the top and feel right on top, right on top of it. I think the sound and the closeness of the crowd is perfect, perfect for soccer. I think obviously you have the safe standing space, in the one end zone, which kind of doubles as the student section for football games. Obviously, it's perfect for lifting tifos. It's perfect for, what goes into soccer, at soccer culture of it's a lot of standing, it's a lot of singing, it's a lot of instrument playing. So I think that does incorporates really, really well. And I just think overall it's an experience. Like, you can bring your family there, and let's say you have a family of 4 and maybe you only have one, maybe you're bringing your daughter to a Wave game, but your son doesn't play soccer, or your other daughter doesn't play soccer. Like, there's so many other things to do at the stadium too, which I think is like, it's such a cool experience for the whole family. Like, we're going to, like, I can't even, I don't even know how many events I've been there in the last year. They're just, everything is so exciting. And, once the Riverwalk gets started, and, all the other plans get started as well, I think it just impacts so many San Diegans, I think, from housing, from the restaurants, from the entertainment district, from once San Diego Mission Valley goes in, it just touches so many different aspects to all the different events that, come to San Diego. I think they knocked it out of the park with design, location, and just, I think, a little bit of something for everybody.
I think I've been to at least one event at Snapdragon, except for a concert. I've not been to a concert yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So looking
And
forward.
I heard yeah, and I heard they, what was just there, Jimmy Buffett and Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Right.
I hear it did really well. I think in the fall, Coldplay and Pink are coming in the fall. So, they're getting like big, big
Right.
time
Right.
names to come into play, here too. So yeah, I can't sing their praises enough for, for what they've done and what it's done for, for the community. And it's been amazing to see, for sure, and be a very, very small part of it, for sure.
Last question before we let you get out of here. So we know about your coaching recent history, at Virginia, University of Denver. Could you tell us a little bit how you got into soccer, just in general, at a young age?
So I grew up in a pretty big sports family, but like mostly basketball players. So that has a funny connection too. So my dad actually played basketball at the University of Michigan. So I always give Dutcher a hard time about that before Dutcher's time, obviously, but pretty unique, connection there. So we've followed San Diego State basketball because of Fisher and Dutch for quite a while. But grew up in a family of basketball players. I got way too many of my mom's genes. My dad is 6'5" and my mom is 5'5", so I ended up right in the middle. Yeah, actually, basketball was my first love, but I felt like I could probably go a little bit farther in soccer with those height restrictions. So I started playing at a really, really young age. 6 years old, and I just had a kind of a propensity for it, and kind of fell into being a goalie, as we probably all do. As you get slower and slower on the field, they kind of move you further and further back in the team, and eventually end up in goal, I guess. Yeah, it worked out really, really, well for me, and, played goalie full time in high school, and, got an opportunity to play at, Concordia University, and had a great experience there, and did not think I was actually going to get into coaching. Wanted to be a lawyer. I was pre-law in college, and just kind of worked out with coaching, and found I had a knack for it, and a desire, to do it. And here I am now.
Incredible.
Yeah.
It's really cool, man. That is great.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking time, Coach Hopkins, as our first guest, as a new branding of the SDSU podcast. So we appreciate you taking the time, and we look forward to seeing how the team does in the fall.
Awesome. Well, anytime you guys need anything at all, let me know. Be more than happy to help. And I think you guys it's an unbelievable place, an unbelievable athletic department, unbelievable university. So I'm excited to hear all the stories that you guys are going to uncover, like I said, from our amazing coaches, our amazing administrators, our amazing student athletes across the board. I think you guys are going to really enjoy your experience.
Appreciate you, Coach.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Welcome back. That was our interview with Coach Ryan Hopkins of San Diego State men's soccer. We obviously built most of the interview around, MLS coming to San Diego, the impacts of Right to Dream. But we asked him about, the last season and looking forward to next season with San Diego State soccer. What was your main takeaways from the interview?
Well, I think the first thing is his idea about the athletic department at San Diego State, and what his comment was about everybody, all of the teams sharing the same space in the Fowler Athletic Center, that allows them to have a camaraderie that's really unique for an athletic department, at the upper echelon of college athletics. And so that's something that we've heard a whole bunch. And I think that sometimes, whether it was by necessity, right, that they're all in the same building, because the San Diego State is so landlocked. I mean, where you're going to be able to put in a whole bunch of different buildings, it's not always easy to find room there. Obviously, the funding to do all of that, etc. And I think that they have found something that makes them special. Whatever the genesis of it, whether it happened because of necessity, the idea that they wanted to keep that, right? Like when the Jam Center was built, they didn't build a separate weight facility for the basketball team because they wanted to make sure that the teams weren't in silos, that they could bounce ideas off of each other. And, I of all of the responses that Coach Hopkins gave in the interview, I think that was the only one that we didn't ask.
Mm-hmm.
He just kind of interjected and said, yeah, but here's the story of our athletic department. And we're really excited about everyone's success, and we bounce ideas off each other, et cetera. And so I thought, he came in wanting to talk about that. And I think that was probably, my big main takeaway that I think is going to stick with me as I pay attention to how, JD Wicker organizes things, et cetera.
Yeah, I'm curious as to how a move to a bigger conference with bigger annual revenues is going to impact that, whether that's going to change. Definitely a topic to ask JD Wicker if and when we get him on the podcast. But I do think that potentially bigger and better facilities might be needed down the road, whether that's going to happen right away or it's a contingent on funding or things like that. I don't know. We throw out a lot of stats on this podcast. I'm a big stats guy. I think you are too. Coach Hopkins might have relayed the craziest stat I think I've heard on this podcast, that Ben Pearson, the sports SID, relayed to him right before the interview, that in the 3 years Coach Hopkins has been coaching San Diego State soccer, he said 65% of their matches have been against top 5 teams in the country.
Unreal.
That is ridiculous. That tells you how good the Pac-12 has been over those 3 years, obviously. And, obviously San Diego State's record was not great. They were 5-9-4 last season. That's not under 500. But considering the competition that they're playing in, they got some good results against some of the higher top teams. But think about that: 65% of the games you're playing are against top 5 teams in the country. In that context, and that stuck with me. I think since we talked to Coach Hopkins, is that's the challenge that you face, the excitement of playing in the Pac-12 and playing against the big boys, but the challenge that comes with that. That's something other athletic teams might be feeling in the near future as well.
I think that's right. And I think the flip side of that is that if that's true of San Diego State, then that's going to also be true of Washington. That's going to also be true of Stanford and those other teams. And obviously they're able to play that daunting of a schedule and still have the top ranking. I think another aspect of it, it didn't really come up, but just piggybacking off of what you're saying is, 2 years ago, San Diego State had the number 1 recruiting class in the country in soccer, and it didn't translate immediately into wins. And the recruiting for every team, I think, is going to be one of the more interesting aspects. It is more interesting aspects, period. But with all the different changes that are taking place, how San Diego State recruits, I think, is a giant aspect of it. What did you make of the fact that he just got back from Ghana? How coincidental? Did you buy that as a coincidence?
I don't know if I buy it as a coincidence. I think he was very diplomatic.
Absolutely.
Answering that question. He said the trip was starting to be planned in March, had some showcases in Ghana. I think that's genuine, but I think that, very likely in March, he had an idea of what was coming and when it was coming. I think back in March, there were already whispers and talk about how the deal was coming along, and it'd be announced probably in May. So, I think that going the right to dream was in the cards probably all along. Him talking about kind of like taking a boat through a river to get to this old village. Afterwards, when I was writing the article, I pulled up a map of that village, saw the river that they would have crossed over. It's kind of wild to think about the facilities that were created and built and how much money was put into that, and how many, soccer players have come out of that academy just in Ghana. Obviously Denmark and Egypt has had movement as well, but that's a big thing that they can learn from as they're developing and building and the San Diego version of the academy. You won't have to take a boat to a village probably in San Diego, so that's nice. But I think the synergy between the Ghana Academy and San Diego is going to be pretty prevalent. I think there's going to be players going back and forth. I think Coach Hopkins already was talking about how they had 2 guys in high school on the East Coast that came from the Ghana Academy that they're recruiting or they're in contact with. So that synergy, I think, is going to be there. It's going to be very helpful overall, not just for the MLS team, but for San Diego State soccer, but for San Diego overall with youth soccer development.
Yeah, a piece of this that I'm really fascinated by, and Andre, add any details if you have them. But you got these academies, right? And they're all over the world. And it seems like they kind of form a network together, right? That you could have somebody at the Right to Dream in Ghana who then would somehow be connected, when the San Diego one's built, and the teams that they're feeding into, right, all play at different levels. And presumably, if you have, let's say, I don't know exactly how it works, but if you have like the top guy, well, maybe that top person goes and plays at the top place in Denmark. And
Yeah.
even if he's from the Ghana academy, maybe you have a San Diego guy who goes and plays, I don't know how that works. And then where in the pecking order and all that stuff. But the idea that San Diego State could be a component of that, I think, is a really interesting just idea of it, that you could have a guy, and again, I don't know how it works. You could have a guy who is in Egypt at the academy, is not good enough to go play professionally right away, but they see potential in him. So they have him go to San Diego State. I would assume the other local soccer colleges would be a part of this as well. And then it becomes a way for San Diego football community, to be able to say, okay, like, this is one of our guys. And is that how that works?
It's complicated, and I can't claim to be an expert on it. It's nothing like how it is with like basketball and football.
Whoa. If we're going to go from the SDSU football podcast to the SDSU podcast, one of us has to be an expert on this, man. You're the one with soccer season tickets, bro.
Right. I can be a higher expert, I guess. Most people that follow college athletics are used to, you lose your collegiate eligibility when you play a professional game, right? Things like that. Soccer is just very different. Like, take CJ Fodry, for example. Like, he's in high school at Coronado High School. He joins the Loyal Academy. He actually plays in Loyal matches in 2021, which is a professional match, while he's still in high school. And then he decides to enroll in San Diego State and play college soccer for a year, which on the basketball and football side, once you play a game at a Loyal level or pro level, you can't go to college, right? So that whole academy back and forth, I mean, it's a European model that the U.S. is using, although not completely to that standard or to that level. But it is a little bit different than what we're used to on the football and basketball side, and allows someone like a CJ Fodry, and allows what you just talked about, players going back and forth between academies, and that network and that relationship back and forth, and having trust with the Loyal guys to say, okay, well, you can develop him, but hey, we want to recruit him to come to play at San Diego State. So it's a wild, complicated system, but it can be used to your benefit if done correctly, and that when those networks and relationships are built. And at San Diego State, at least from what Coach Hopkins is telling us, they believe they have those networks locally. And with Right to Dream, I think that's just going to only expand.
Talking about that mindset that you just described, when the professional football team, American football team, was in San Diego, they were not a good partner with San Diego State. I think that it's really easy to see, okay, well, there was San Diego State, their soccer team. They go to the Pac-12. They're the best men's soccer team in town, right? Maybe this in outdoor anyway. And then FC, what was it, 1904?
Yeah.
And then the Loyal, and now MLS. And like, does that bury any hopes that San Diego State could gather some of that? Which I will say, in the couple of games that I've been to, the show is fantastic on the pitch. If there's ever a group of people who were like made for soccer, right? It's the student section at San Diego State, but it's as you say, it's a different model. And so like they can be mutually helpful to each other. Where I think with the value with the value that's put on education in U.S. soccer, period, right? I mean, that's a big component of it. For the Right to Dream to put roots in San Diego and not have an academic component to it, I think would just rub people the wrong way, and it would feel like exploitation, and it would, all those things that for good reason. European soccer has been accused of, kind of soccer imperialism for a long time. And so San Diego State can fill that academic void to make it look like the mission of what people can get behind and be proud of. And then also they can also help to funnel players to San Diego State, help with those relationships. They're obviously playing at San Diego State Stadium.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of getting rid of that Chargers Aztecs mindset and thinking that they're competing against each other in some regard, I think also needs to go out the window. That this can be something that is beneficial to all parties and helps every party to reach what it is that they're striving after.
I don't want to get off tangent too much, but what do you think that the Chargers didn't do that they should have done that would have networked with the San Diego State?
Well, I mean, I think the budget is the first thing. The highest paying tenant in Qualcomm Stadium for years was the Aztecs. They were the only ones paying rent. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the first piece of it is just not you being the NFL team and not just sucking from the city, and then the city in trying to, balance its budget as much as it could, pushed as much of that money-making part onto the Aztecs as they could, because San Diego State was the other tenant. And so there was just so many different things that San Diego State, like the parking and things like that San Diego State couldn't even get money for. And then, you just think about all of the costs of the stadium, and all the things that weren't fixed and all the things that they didn't. Well, if there was a group that could have done that, it's the one from the National Football League, right? The scoreboards, all those kinds of pieces of it. And then, you go into the stadium and, I think the Aztecs didn't sell in the team store. They couldn't even figure that out. Which, you go into the team store during a Wave game and what do you see? Wave stuff, right? I mean, that's kind of there. So I think they could have done that. It's the red and black held to our team, except in their home stadium where there's no red and black except for the canopies that are covering up the upper deck. You know what I mean? And then they finally did that overhang on the back of it that kind of gave it a little bit of just some of that Aztec color that they were able to do. I think that you never saw events where Charger players and Aztecs were all at the same thing doing this, you know what I mean? Or any promotion from the Chargers where they could have went and it's a preseason game and it's like the Aztecs will be playing here next week and just any acknowledgement that they even existed. I think would have been easy things to do, but just wasn't something the Chargers were interested in.
Yeah, maybe I thought you were also going into an avenue of the Chargers giving San Diego State graduates workouts and tryouts and helping them with pro day and things like that. But yeah, I see where you're going.
Yes, 100%, 100%. And in fact, I think that may have actually happened a little bit. I actually think that side of it, but that was to the benefit of the Chargers, right? If you're the guy who's running the pro day, that benefits you because you have that, all of that stuff. And so anyway, so it created this idea in Aztec fans, rightly, that there was a competition there, that the Chargers being the football team and the main football team, it just created something negative for San Diego State. And it's hard to shake that as an idea and just saying that's not what's happening with soccer.
Yeah, it's kind of going back to Coach Hopkins. I think looking forward to their season coming up, he talked about how they had been a young team the last couple of years, took their lumps. They've had, I think he said 19 players returning in this spring camp, which just ended. Looking forward to the season. So he's hoping that, the record is better, the development is better, the performance is better. So we'll keep an eye out on that as the season starts. But I think you can also, based on that right to dream and the impact that it could have on them, it's going to put these expectations on recruiting and performance that's maybe hasn't been there over the last, 5-10 years, even before Coach got here. So, that's something that, with the networks and the relationships and the academy, I think the expectations are going to get higher.
I think you're right, and I think again, I'm really curious how the model works. I mean, you have all of these young guys in Right to Dream playing against presumably older players in MLS, and we all know what age and how all that matters, and so how long it takes to build a team that San Diego is going to be excited about, for the San Diego team, given that they go through the academies. And then the flip side of it is how long does it take before that next level, trickles down to San Diego State? It's just something I'm curious to see. I'm not really sure that there's an answer. The last thing that I wanted to ask you about, we asked them about Snapdragon Stadium as a soccer stadium. You took me to that Wave game, and that I alluded to in the conversation. It's incredible.
Yeah.
As a soccer venue. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, obviously you have all of the international matches, the Gold Cup coming up, the MLS commissioner talking about how it's one of the best, in the league. But it really is a special place to watch soccer. It's pretty amazing that they were able to build a football stadium and actually make it like really good for soccer. That seems like a pretty hard thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think they built the stadium to be multi-use for football and soccer, and some of the things they did were mostly soccer related, like the middle locker room entrance. That's all because of soccer. Like, they don't do that if there's no anticipation of soccer being played at that stadium. Even JD Wickers said that at the grand opening, and he said that multiple times. Student section having that metal bar for each seat because San Diego or soccer supporters are standing, and that metal bar gives them a chance to kind of rest their hands on as they're standing for a 90-minute match. So that was strictly soccer, that's not really a football thing. The size of the stadium. Now, MLS, I think, likes 25,000 seat stadiums. They don't necessarily want the 35, but I think they made an exception here. The canopies, I think with the games on Apple TV Apple TV at 7:30 at Saturday nights, canopies, I guess, weren't necessary, although it has been a requirement up until now. But then again, Apple TV is not going to have the media rights for 50 years. So what happens when the new media rights come over and they want to put games at noon or whatever? So things to think about in the years to come. But yeah, the stadium was built. A lot of things were done in the stadium that were built for soccer specifically, which didn't interfere with the football experience, which I think is the key. And yeah, it's a perfect venue for soccer. There's not, I've been watching more, NWSL matches, and you see the stadiums that the Wave are playing at around the country, and some of them are really nice, some of them are a little older, but I don't think there's many that you can say is better than Snapdragon Stadium. Some may be as equal, but yeah, it's a great venue. I enjoy going to games there, whatever games they are, soccer, football. I've been to a rugby game, a Legion match, but hopefully I can check one of those out in the near future too.
Everything that San Diego State talked about in the election leading up to it is like coming into fruition. And I think we talked about after the celebration event that, there's kind of this long victory lap that the friends of SDSU, supporters of SDSU can be able to take. I think here's another fruit of that. This is an MLS team that's coming into San Diego State's stadium as a tenant who's going to provide, money and to revenue to the university and to the mission that they have there. And as you said, down the road, they should be offering players for San Diego State soccer. And if the story that will be told of any success that San Diego State has, and if San Diego State can, get into the playoffs and get into those things in the NCAA's. I mean, you saw how galvanized people were over softball. They'll be galvanized over soccer as well. When that happens, the story that will be told is MLS, Right to Dream, partnership, and all the stuff that Coach Hopkins gave us an insight into in this conversation.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think as we talked about at the open, like we're really looking forward to telling these stories and having these conversations about, something other than football. Football's still going to be our bread and butter. Our next two interviews that we've already concluded that will come out after this episode are with class of 24 football commits. So if you're tuning in for football coverage, you'll still get a lot of it.
Well, let's do one thing. Let's do one thing. I'm going to ask
Yeah.
you a question.
Yeah.
Schedule came out for SDSU football.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously go anywhere you want from that. What do you make of CBS proper putting SDSU UCLA at 4:00?
4:30, right?
Okay.
The CBS doesn't do 7:30 games, and so I think it was 12:30 and 4:30.
Right.
And I think after last year's the 12:30 p.m. Arizona debacle, I think if they even thought about that there would have been a discussion with JD Wicker and San Diego State about is there a different time. I don't remember seeing who the 12:30 game is that day, but I think CBS got a 12:30 game.
Sure.
And 4:30 is perfect. It's 7:30 on the East Coast. UCLA is a big name, so people are going to watch it because of UCLA. Their last year in the Pac-12. They've got new quarterbacks in after DTR finally graduated after, I don't know, his 7 years at UCLA. I kid because I love DTR. My family, my sister, brother-in-law are UCLA alums, so I have a soft spot for UCLA, and I love DTR. But I felt like he was in college for like 7 or 8 years. Chip Kelly offense. So that's going to be an intriguing, fun matchup nationwide, and it's going to be a big opportunity. Now, if you're San Diego State, you hope you're 2-0 heading into that contest with 2 home games against non-Power 5 teams. Obviously, Ohio, who had a great year last year, no doubt about that, and then Idaho State. But you're hoping you're 2-0 going into that match, which will add a little bit more, intrigue into the match, into the game. So I think 4:30, it's a perfect time slot for all of us, including the media. We're not going to be there till 2 in the morning.
Right.
So I love it. I'm trying to get my sister and brother-in-law and some other friends and family coming down for that match. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, I see. I like how it's been a match. UCLA.
Yeah, we're thinking soccer.
Yeah, I know, bro. I don't. Yeah. No, I think it's perfect, and I think sometimes the times that they have played on CBS, I think they had a 9 a.m. against Boise State.
Black Friday.
Yeah, a 12:30, as you mentioned. And they always felt a little bit like, I don't know, kind of throw-in games. I don't know how else to say it. Like there wasn't anything compelling on the other slots. So, hey, let's do that. And I think this game really, really seems like just a marquee matchup. I mean, if everything happens as it seems like, the predictions are out there about, there is the poetry of of one team moving out of the Pac-12, one team moving into the Pac-12, and certainly conference realignment in anything that USC and UCLA does the entire year is going to be mentioned, and quite possibly San Diego State too. I think just to your point, you had mentioned canopies earlier, and you could very easily see those kind of accommodations going forward for an MLS team, figuring out how to beat the heat and things of that nature. But I think overall, San Diego State's schedule is really challenging up front, and then depending on what happens is how good the teams are in the Mountain West, it should taper off. But it's I think what they want, right? I mean, you go into a power conference and you should have stretches like this, tough stretches like this. And I think in the article that I wrote about their schedule, I think it's a harder schedule than USC has to open their season up. I don't know how many times you could have said that in San Diego State's history.
So you know what game is at 12:30 on CBS?
No.
UNLV at Michigan. CBS wanted to put UCLA, San Diego State at that time slot because that's their prime slot. And there had to have been pushback from San Diego State to be like, nah, not this year.
You think?
Right.
Because that would mean they would be kicking off at 7:00 at Michigan. Yeah, I guess they would do that.
Or they would get a 9 a.m. start. They would play early.
Oh, they don't have a 9 a.m.
I don't know. CBS doesn't. Not that morning.
Interesting.
Or UNLV Michigan goes to another channel.
Right.
Another channel takes them. I mean, honestly, Michigan is a top 5 team. They're going to be a contender. So, I mean, maybe they had the trump card anyway over San Diego State, UCLA. But, yeah, I mean, UNLV Michigan is going to be a blowout. No, no offense to UNLV, but anyway.
Anyway, there you go. Talk a little football.
As we talked about, let us know. We want to hear from you to see who you guys want us to interview in terms of coaches, players, on all the different athletic teams around San Diego State. We're going to try to do our best to get as many as we can, at least through the summer before football season starts. Because once that starts, it's going to be a little bit more difficult timing-wise. But we'll do the best that we can. We appreciate you guys as always listening, sharing, liking, following, subscribing on all your favorite platforms. Appreciate you guys listening, and we know you guys enjoy it. We're hoping that expanding and branching out will bring in some people that haven't been listening, or maybe aren't as interested in football, but are interested more in basketball, soccer, baseball, softball, golf, all sorts of stuff. Any last words, Paul?
Just commend you. It's a great idea. As we're passing the baton, I guess, from the football one. This is your baby, man. Done a great job. 71 episodes of it, man. And, looking forward to more of them.
Sounds good. We'll talk to you guys next time. You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagberdian and Paul Garrison.